Popular opinion, unpopular opinion. Some of you guys are going to be in your feelings. That's quite okay. I really don't mind. We're going to talk about it. I got a guest. Responsibility, racism, privilege, in light of some of the situations that are happening today. And not sure how many of you guys are keeping up, but there's some wild stuff in the news. And I got a friend of mine who is gonna help me understand some things and hopefully help all of us learn from her perspective. But before we get into all that, I gotta drop the intro one time.
I don't need nothing else. Every time I'm with you, yo, it's something else. It's a fact, and it's nothing else. Got your hand out, you don't even need a help. Ooh, I don't need nothing else. Every time I'm with you, yo, it's something else. It's a fact, and it's nothing else. Got your hand out, you don't even need a help. Ooh, that's right. I don't need nothing else. That's right.
What's going on? It's Ruslan with King'sDreamEnt.com. This channel exists to encourage, empower, inspire you to live God's dream for your life. We cover a variety of different topics, from music marketing to faith to fitness, all kinds of stuff in between. And lately, I've been having a blast doing this series called Unpopular Opinion. I didn't even know it was a series until just now. I did a couple videos called Unpopular Opinion. Some of them loosely overlap, some of them don't. And I wanted to talk about one of my unpopular opinions today that I think some of you guys will be challenged by. I think I'll actually be challenged by, if I'm being completely honest with you. And this idea and this tension of responsibility, personal responsibility, but also responsibility for those of us that are in positions of influence, in positions of power, in position of privilege over the whole the systems that we have influence over. Now, today is a very interesting day. Obviously, there's this whole thing happening with sheltering in place, and got some people, you know, a little foggy in how they're dealing with people. And I woke up to the news of this situation on my man Preston Perry's Instagram post, and it was a situation of a woman named Amy Cooper, completely belligerent, losing her mind, dag near killing her own dog because she was threatened by a black man named Christian Cooper in Central Park. I didn't know this was in Central Park initially, and calling the police, saying, I'm gonna call the police and say this and this and that. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. And then I found out it was in Central Park. I'm like, Central Park, this is New York City, like New York City, one of the, you know, the melting pot. So that really bugged me out. And then the very next thing I see is George Floyd, a black man in Minneapolis, who is another horrible, unfortunate black man killed by police, begging for his life, saying he can't breathe. And this is where I kind of started my morning. And me and my friend Kivana have been having this conversation in a comment section of a different video, and I wanted to really unpack this because I think, those of us who have influence, those of us who have power, privilege, it's important for us to be self-aware enough to know that how we view things and when we choose to be silent and not silent impacts the rest of the society and the people around us. And some of you guys know my wife is black, my son is black, half black, whatever you want to call it. I grew up a refugee, single parent household on welfare, and I experienced a degree of being viewed as a white male, but I also grew up as an immigrant, as a refugee, as a very, very different perspective. And so this has been, I guess, kind of a balancing act in my life to understand my own privilege in a lot of these things and to process that sometimes externally through the YouTube channel, sometimes personally, and having amazing black men who have been mentors in my life as far back as I can remember, and people being patient with me and like explaining some of these ideas and demystifying some of these ideas. It took me a while to understand that white privilege didn't mean white guilt. My ancestors had nothing to do with slavery, had nothing to do with the way the system was built here. Yet I still benefit to a degree as a white male in the way I'm viewed in society. And so I wanted to talk about that, and ultimately where I would want to land at is that we would all be in a place of empathy. We would all be in a place of listening, especially right now. My white brothers and sisters, this is not the time for you to go and do your own investigating. This is a time for you to hurt with those who are hurting and to listen. And I think that is going to show more and do more than you trying to get to the end of it. And so anyway, I wanted to bring on my friend Ivana, get her take on some of this stuff, recap on a conversation we were having in a comment section of mine, and hopefully it blesses you guys and benefits you. So, without any further ado, bam, what up? You can unmute yourself now. Thank you for being here. So we met, it's the first time I'm doing this, we met just now, but we engaged through a YouTube comments section. You're still muted, I think, sis. Yeah. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, there
you go.
Hello.
So can you just introduce yourself, kind of to your story real quick, and then we'll get into some of these weighty topics.
All right. So, hello, everybody out there. How you doing? I'm the girl Kavana, and I help people to confront their biases and racist thoughts or ideas that they may or may not realize that they have. So, my background is that I, of course, am a Black woman, but I grew up with the perspective, the worldview that, well, I didn't even tell you this, Ruslan, but that racism was over. That's one. Two, that white privilege did not exist because we're all on the level playing field. We all live in America. We all have the same opportunities. So for you over there who's crying about racism, all that stuff, just put your boots on the ground and do what you got to do to get what you want in life. And so, yeah, pretty much around the last election in 2016, the Lord brought to my attention how evil and wicked my mindset was. And he rebuked me heavily. And it was a very hard and sorrowful process for me. And by God's grace, I'm here today and I'm able to help other people because I went through the process of coming to realizing my own biases and whatnot. So yeah, so I'm glad that led us to one another, Ruslan, and I'm here and I'm ready to do this thing. Woo-hoo.
Can you do me a favor? Just scooch a little bit more towards that door so we keep you on the frame because you're kind of cut off. Yeah, just a hair. Bam. Okay. So you said some of your own biases that you didn't know you had. Can you break some of those down? Because I know when you start describing these, people are going to relate to them. So can you break some of those biases down just a bit for me?
Yes. So for one, if there was whether it be a killing of a Black man, or any situation of the like, I would always wonder, well, what did they do? I would think, oh, the cops had a good reason for doing what they did. And I empathize a lot with the police force. And I thought that people were just crybaby. That we lived in the age we lived in. We were no longer in the civil rights movement time. We didn't live in Jim Crow. So what is all this talk of racism that you're bringing up? And I gave no validity to that whatsoever. So at least even when there were instances of it, I dismissed it wholeheartedly. So yeah, and I believe that if you wanted something in life, then you just needed to go after it and stop blaming everybody around you for where you are in your life or what has happened to you or somebody else because you put yourself there. So
that's heavy, and I think it's interesting the way that you described it. You said that the racism you had was essentially against your own race, in that when there would be a killing of an unarmed Black man, that your instant thought first went to, well, what did he do to deserve it? He must have done something to deserve it. And that's such a wild thing, because all of us have kind of, I could definitely relate when something comes out and my mind goes to, well, what's the other side? What happened? What's the context, right? Instead of looking at especially these last couple instances that we've seen, right? The instance in Georgia with Ahmad, the instance today that well, I don't know how long ago it happened, but the video came out today in Minneapolis where you're seeing, I mean, nobody deserves what is happening in these situations. There's no he went for a gun, we didn't know. Like, this is clear cut. This is just clear cut, and the part that frustrates me is that my brothers and sisters who are white, instead of listening, instantly push back with, well, let's let the facts come out. Right? Instead of saying, this don't look right. This does not look right. And if this was a white male in these types of situations and it was on footage, they would probably be substantially more outraged, or it probably would not have happened. And it goes to this subtle subconscious thing that we have, or we do see some lives and some people as disposable almost, you know? And it's very sad. It's very unfortunate. And thank you so much for sharing that. So let's kind of ease into where our conversation and the conversation we were having in the comment section. I did a video on conspiracy theories, and I made a point that I just kind of glossed over, and you kind of had some pushback. So can you kind of recap that and share your thoughts on that? And can you kind of just scooch just a tad bit more into your right? Yes, there we go. Perfect. Okay. There you go. Perfect.
So awesome. So when I was watching the video, great video, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. So when I was watching the video, I was going along. I was like I said, learning and absorbing, and then the comments came up about food deserts, and if you want, or at least if you're in a food desert, to eat healthier, and the topic about white privilege, and then I was like, okay, well, I was like, okay, well, brother, you know, I appreciate what you're touching on here, but these are very serious, multifaceted issues that don't necessarily have a simple solution as just go and get healthier food. I mean, there are many initiatives that have been launched in these lower income communities to get fresh produce to them, because they have a shortage of grocery stores within their section because of redlining. It calls for Black people to be bunched together in certain zones, and grocery stores were not put there. White people did not want to put their grocery stores in these areas. And so that created that issue. And I was just thinking that making those comments seemed very, to me at the time, just ignorant and just a little bit careless. And I'm just like, okay, you know what, like, again, I feel what you're saying and I see what you're saying, but we just need to be a little bit more responsible and in the overall context of this conversation. Because I mean, in that light, there is, responsibility in that if fresh fruits are available here in your communities, and that there is information being given, because again, there are initiatives that are putting it out there. Yeah, do that. But at the same time, there is a serious issue happening around that. And that's why so many initiatives are pushed forward in these communities. So,
yeah. So I think my exact quote was, broad generalities are the epitome of ignorance. Broad generalities. So when we start generalizing, and I was in that video, it was in context of putting all people in a group, right? So when people say all police officers are racist, or all Asian people are smart and good at math, right? Or all white people are privileged, right? So what I was saying was that there is a difference between all people being one thing in one way versus systems that position certain people in advantages over other people. So I guess what I was getting at, and I guess in this conversation, is I think both can coexist. I think there can be a degree of white privilege that every white person has in the way they're viewed by law enforcement, in the way they're viewed on a surface level, in the way that maybe they don't have to endure some of the things you mentioned of the way Black people have been treated by law enforcement, the way there's been redlining, the way there's been Jim Crow, the way there's been all these consistent injustices, the war on drugs, Iran-Contra, like repeatedly assaulting the Black community. And I guess the flip side of that is that to say that every white person is privileged in a personal way, whether that's economically or that is having both family members in home. This is. I'll give you an example like this. Are you familiar with my artist Paul Russell?
No, I'm not.
Okay, check him out. He's amazing. He's super dope. And
Okay.
I didn't quite understand Paul until I met his parents. Paul is I think he's 21, 22 Black man, went to Cornell University, was the leader, the president of all the fraternities, right? And dad has a corporate job. Mom's amazing. I mean, I hung out with him and his mom and his dad, and it was like hanging out with the Obamas, like that degree of charm, super fun, like amazing. And when I met his parents, then I understood like, oh, that's how you're able to be a genius at music. You're able to go to Cornell and crush it. You're able to do all these things exceptionally well. I understand because you have amazing parents. He has an older sister who was a professional spoken word artist. So there was that degree of, so if we were to line up advantages, he definitely was advantaged or privileged in certain areas, yet on a surface level, I would be viewed differently than him in certain sectors, whether that's professionally or by law enforcement. However, when you meet his parents and you understand the upbringing, then it makes sense like, wow, this is really cool that you had these advantages, right? And so that's where I would say though both ideas can coexist. A Black male can have advantages and have privileges, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give my Black son more advantages. I'm trying to give him more opportunities. I'm trying to give him more privilege, while at the same time saying, but on a macro scale, we all do experience some degree of white privilege. Even though every white person isn't personally more privileged than every Black person, right? So we can't use that as a generality, because there's poor white people. There's white people that come from foster homes. There's white people that come from crazy trauma, abuse, addiction, and we can't discredit their pain as well. And I think that's what makes some white people get so defensive about the idea of white privilege, is they're going to say, well, wait a minute, no, I didn't grow up wealthy. I didn't grow up with both parents in the house. I didn't grow up with going to a good school. I didn't get to go to an Ivy League college. I didn't get a handout, right? I didn't get any. I had to work for everything they had. And I think that's where that kind of tension comes in, is like, hey, the word privilege is just triggering for a lot of people, but let's just use the word advantages, right? And by and large, white people in America have more advantages than Black people. That it's just a true statement. But I think sometimes the way we ease into that is we use broad generalities, and then the conversation gets nowhere, because then we're not talking about systems, we're talking about individuals, and individuals are unique. Individuals are different. Individuals have so much nuance to them. So anyway, I didn't mean to ramble on. What are your thoughts on those ideas?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I appreciate your distinction in using the word advantages, because I feel like anyone can receive an advantage, and by hard work, using your wits and all of those things, I believe that you can achieve advantages in your life. However, when we talk about white privilege, and I thank you so much for pointing out how white people have felt that, like I'm poor too. I don't have both parents too. I don't this, that, and how that is a touchy subject for them. And what I would say to that is that if you look at all of what's happening around us in today's society, that's not happening to you.
Yeah.
And that is something, that is a privilege that you have. You did not earn it. You did nothing to deserve it. That is something that you were given because of your lineage. And so it is something that is that needs to be understood, because, you know, like let's think about death for me. I know I'm getting cynical, but just follow a sister for a second. Like, let's think about death. Anybody can get hit by a car or a freak accident or anything like that. But when it comes to violence and racism, that does not happen to.
Oh, you froze. You froze. No, she was on such a good point. No. Oh, man. Okay. Hold on. Did we lose her? I think we lose her. Lineage or systems. Careful. Okay. What happened? Hopefully she comes back. I don't know if her phone died. Man, she was really on to something. She was going in. Yo. Okay. Let me see if I can get her back. We lost you. The Lord intervened. Stop it, Davis Absolute. Yeah, dang it. We lost her. Okay, I'm going to try to call her back. Hold up. Okay, so here's the thing. Here's the thing that I think. You were on a roll and we lost you.
I know. Man.
Okay, keep going. I'm going to pin you back up. Go ahead.
All right. So keep talking right now?
Yeah, but we lost you. Yeah, we lost you start about death, and then you cut out.
Dang it. Okay. All
you
right.
said some degree, some things of death I don't have to worry about, right? And so that was the last thing we heard.
Okay. All right. So, anybody can get into a car accident. Mm-hmm. Anybody can, a freak accident can happen. Anybody, like, stuff like that can happen to anyone. However, when it comes to living while Black, living in your own skin, living in your own experiences, most people, if you are white, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about death coming to your door because of the color of your skin. You know, I think about Mother's Day, okay? On Mother's Day was a very tough day for me. And I say that because it was the weekend of Ahmaud Arbery's birthday, and the run happened and all that. And on that day, I was just thinking about his mother that day. And I was like, you know what, Lord, her pain is my pain, and her son is my son. And I say that because there's nothing about Ahmaud that he did that should have warranted for him to die in such a terrible way. And I think about myself, I'm like, what makes me different, or my children, my two Black boys, what makes them different from Ahmaud, Trayvon, or anybody else, you know? And it's, I like, as a Black woman, I have to pray prayers that your mother never had to pray for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have to not only.
I gave me goosebumps right now. Goodness. Wow. Whew, that's heavy.
Brother, I had to take several moments of lament on Mother's Day to pray for my Black sisters. And given where I used to be in my mindset, that's not a connection that I ever had with my Black sisters. You know, even though many of us have not experienced that, such a terrible tragedy. So, but at the same time, so many of us have. And what we all have in common is that we're Black and we're raising Black children in this world who are surrounded by people who have biases that they may not realize, and racist tendencies and mindsets that they don't even realize they have, or maybe they do know that they have them. But they're going out into this world with that, and you know, and that's a privilege. That's a privilege that your parents had for you, you know, over your life, and that's a privilege that you live every single day as a white person in this country. And it's no fault of your own. It was built that way. It was constructed that way, unfortunately, because of the minds of the forefathers before you. It all came from that. But this is something that you've inherited. And that's why I believe that all white people do have privilege, and it's not something to me that's really disputable. And you know, and I think about also, well, no. Okay, I'll stop.
So let me just chime in on that. So let's now let me break it down in a way where there's math attached to it, right? Because some of you guys are gonna be like, well, what is it? Like even in the comments, like, well, what do you mean? It's not. I don't know. 40 years ago, being white was an advantage, but not today. So let's just look at the math. You're 4 times more likely to die by the hands of a police officer if you're black than if you're white. That is an undeniable statistic. Some people will say, well, more white people get killed by police than more black people. What they don't do is they don't adjust for ratios. Black people make I think, 11 to 12% of the population. White people make, I think, up to 65 or 70% of the population. If you look at the ratios, black people are more likely to die by the hands of a police officer than white people. That is an undisputable fact. Another fact, for me personally, I've been to about 6 or 7 funerals in my lifetime. Two of those were of unarmed black men that I personally knew that were killed by police. 2. So this whole like, yo, it's not, no, like this stuff happens. Everything's not a hashtag. Everyone's not a hashtag. But there are times where you are looking at people who took an oath to serve and protect, to actually serve and protect, and you're seeing some people who are treated in a disposable way, and the facts need to come out, and this needs to come out. And so I think that you're totally right. So now let me give you some of the pushback, because here's some of the pushback, right? I don't have an advantage if I want to be a pro athlete or a musician. I think this is just silly. I think this is just silly. This is one of the comments on YouTube. I don't have an advantage when I apply for a job because employers don't need me to meet a quota for white men. I don't have an advantage if I want to be a pro athlete or a musician. Break that down for me.
Well, first and foremost, again, if it was you read the comments of what 2 or 3 people, and one was somebody who hired people.
No, he's saying he's going back to affirmative action. Certain jobs need to have certain quotas of black people and Hispanic people, whatever. So he's saying, well, I don't have an advantage when I go in and I want, I'm trying to get a job and this person has to meet a quota of X amount of black people, right? Because of affirmative action or because of getting into a school, right? So that's one pushback. And then the following, same comment, the following pushback is, I don't have an advantage if I want to be a pro athlete or a musician.
That last comment I'll address first. That you and this is a white person, I'm assuming, a white person saying that they don't have an advantage if they want to be a pro athlete or a musician, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, that was a racist comment you just made. I just want for you to understand that. Because if you're saying that because black, I use it. If there's a nuance there to say that black people, what are they more favored? Are they just more athletic? Are they, like, what are you even inferring by saying that? Where if you have talent, Ruslan is white, but Ruslan is black. So it's like, what do you mean that you wouldn't have advantage against a black person? I mean, of course, you may have your own obstacles within whichever space, but I mean, it comes down to talent. People hire talent. Teams hire talent. Record companies hire people who will sell records. If you can't sell records, if you can't put out bomb music, then you ain't gonna get signed. Like, don't put this on whether or not if you're white. It's not like you want to be a victim. I'm sorry. Yeah,
it's also silly because even though I'm white in a black art form and I am a guest in hip hop, I still have an advantage because I'm white, because I'm deemed safer in the demographics that I'm in, where the way I'm perceived is just viewed safer versus some of my black counterparts. I've seen this firsthand on the road. I've seen this with how people get treated when we travel, especially in the South. I've seen this time and time over and over again, that repeatedly I am treated different, and repeatedly I absolutely have a privilege as a white rapper, even though I'm a a white person in hip hop, which is predominantly a black art form, is a black, and it comes from the black church. So I think that is that I acknowledge that I have advantages, and I could do certain things, and I could say certain things, and I could make a video like this, where I'm telling white people we need to own our privilege, and I won't be dismissed as the angry black man, like when Derek Minor or propaganda would say the same thing. You would just dismiss them, or you would say, "Oh, brother, put Jesus first. Why are you talking about social issues? You just need to focus on the gospel," right? How much of that have we heard from the Christian hip hop audience, from the Christian community, towards Lecrae, all these different things? And so I think that is just unfortunate. Now, I think that if we're looking we're talking macro scale, we're talking systems, we're talking who and why was this country built for? And it's white males. Like, it just is what it is. That doesn't mean that every white male is gonna be a millionaire and gonna be rich. That's not, those two things aren't the same. Like, those two things are not the same. Like that just means that listen, if I'm going to build, if I'm gonna build a workout program, I'm not gonna consider women and their physiology. I'm gonna build it for men, and men will probably have better results because that's who I was considering in building my workout program. And that's a very superficial metaphor, and it's flawed, so guess who's gonna get better results and benefit better if they follow my workout plan? Simply because of my perspective as a male, that the female body works different. There's all kinds of physiological differences there. I'm going to build it with my own prerogative in mind, and it's gonna benefit people that have similar backgrounds as I do. That is what's happened in America. Like, that is where we are. That doesn't mean that by and large the country is evil and all white people are evil and all white people should feel guilty. It means this. It means Jesus took responsibility for mine and your sin, even though he didn't commit the sin. Even though he wasn't personally responsible, he still took on that responsibility. There was a systemic sin issue because of the sin of Adam, and Jesus said, you know what? I'm going to step in. I'm going to live the life that they can't live, and I'm going to die the death that they should have died, and I'm going to own that, and I'm going to put that on my back, and I got it. And so when I see this happening with white Christians, I don't understand, why are we not following the example of Jesus and saying, listen, on a macro scale, we have responsibility that we need to take, because the more silent we are, the more we enable injustice. The more silent we are, the more these things are happening. And I feel like there is a shift happening. I'm seeing more and more of my white pastors speak out. I'm seeing more and more of my white friends speak out, because they're saying, listen, enough is enough. And a lot of them also didn't get it until they were around some of my friends, my black friends, and heard their stories. And I didn't get a lot of it until I started traveling and seeing how I get treated different in a restaurant. I get treated different on an airplane. I get treated different, right? And so I think that becomes the tough part, is like, yo, Jesus took responsibility for something he had nothing to do with when we're talking about sin, and he decided to take care of it, yet we are so dismissive of our responsibility. And again, responsibility doesn't mean guilt. Responsibility doesn't mean shame. Responsibility doesn't, that you shouldn't feel guilty or ashamed for something that maybe you personally, you're not responsible for. But when you take responsibility, that's what leaders do. That's what leaders do. That's what people of influence do. I can't step into my home and I'm the husband, I'm the head. I can't step into my home and my wife is in a mood or something's going on and dismiss her and say, oh, well, she's just being emotional. She's being a victim. Look at that victim. And I got to say, wait. I have power and I have privilege in this context. I have to take responsibility for what she's feeling and see what's going on with her and listen to her. And maybe I caused it and maybe I didn't. And even when I didn't, I still take the responsibility to listen, be patient, be empathetic, put myself in her shoes, or at least do my very best effort to do that. Imagine if we extended that logic to marriages, to family members. Like, oh, you're just, like, stop and slow down and hear people. Listen to what they're saying. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm ranting. Do you want to chime in on some of this stuff?
Nah, bro, you are on a you are fire. honestly, there was a couple scriptures that came to mind, and I cannot. I don't know, it came to my mind to write it down, and I did not before this conversation, and now I'm regretting it. But I'll let you know, and maybe you could put it like in the description box below after this conversation. But there is several things. There is a scripture in, I believe, First Kings, that talks about Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Mm-hmm. And it is talking about not what you would usually think of when you think of Sodom and Gomorrah, but it's talking about how God was so angry with the children of Israel and how they turned their noses away at the poor and their suffering, and how they were not feeding them, they were not clothing them, they were not doing all of these things that would be reflective of his heart, his nature, towards these people that they have been called to do. And that is why he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And so I'm so upset. I'm so sorry that I did not remember that, but I'll let you know that after this. But another thing, as far as like what people said, like you touched on why like how people say, oh, just focus on the gospel, focus on Jesus, while we talk about these things. And I beg to say that this topic falls under what Jesus would consider murder, that racism is murder. And this was a concept that I learned about from someone called Jamar Tisby. Look him up if you want to grow in your knowledge and understanding of racism in the church and all the history. Please look him up. But he used two scriptures and the Westminster Catechism to bring home this point. In that Exodus 20:13, Exodus 20:13 says, thou shalt not kill, right? Okay, so now let me skip ahead to Matthew 5:21 through 22. He said, you have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not kill, but whoever shall kill shall be in endangerment of the judgment. But I say unto you that whosoever is angry with his brother without cause shall be in danger of judgment. And to whosoever shall say Raka, okay, yeah, you got to deal. So you got to deal with that. So when Jamar Tisby brought up the Westminster Catechism, it poses two questions. It says, what is required of the sixth commandment, thou shalt not kill? So it says that it requires all lawful endeavors to preserve our own life and the lives of others. So what does it mean to preserve? It means to protect, save, safeguard, maintain, care for, take care of, and look after, etc. All right. And so, and that poses another question: what is forbidden in the sixth commandment? And it says, taking away your own life or the life of your neighbor unjustly, or whatever thereof unto. So what does that look like? It does look like slavery. It does look like racism, segregation, Jim Crow, lynching, all of those things. But guess what? It also falls into it, your apathetic attitudes and hearts towards the suffering of others. That also falls into that. So I beg to make that argument. So
that's good. That's good. Now let me gather your thoughts on, I guess, more of an individual level, right? Which is where I said, and by the way, I do my best to not speak on whatever issues are in other communities, right? I'm focused on my community, my household, my friends. So, like I don't have a position on if black people should or shouldn't use the N-word. That's not a position. I don't need to have a position on that. Black people can decide amongst themselves if they need to use the N-word. I don't need to, hey, this is what I think. Now, I have a son that's black. I'm going to tell him what the word means when he's old enough. If he wants to use it, that's going to be his choice. I wouldn't like him to use it. You know what I'm saying? But that's going to be on him. So I think in the same way, I don't want to generalize. Again, broad generalizations are the epitome of ignorance. I don't want to generalize, but I want to speak on an individual level. One of the reasons why I have a channel that exists, one of the reasons why I make music is because I feel and believe that when we see people who come from similar backgrounds, single parent household, poverty, welfare, and they're able to defy the odds. An immigrant comes here, starts a business, builds it up. Someone from the hood grows up poor, grows up black, disadvantaged in many ways, and they make it out. I feel like that inspiration, that example of a person, packaged with the right information and the right opportunity, can help people change their family dynamic and their family tree. So the most practical example for me that this looked like was Dave Ramsey. I grew up in poverty, mom on welfare, never knew how to handle money well, got into a ridiculous amount of debt doing what poor people do with money, which is rack up student loans, buy a car and get a car payment. You know what I mean? I literally made every single mistake I could with money. And then I discovered Dave Ramsey, and within a matter of 18 months, we were able to pay off $45,000 of debt in 18 months and then save up 6 months of living expenses. And now we're changing our family tree, and we're going to be the first people in our family to do some amazing things. So much of that was personal. So much of that was individual choices, from access to information, inspiration, and the opportunity to go out in the marketplace and crush it. And I think now we have the opportunity to do a lot of amazing things in the marketplace. We have the inspiration, we have the information, and I think when we combine those three things, just about anybody could defy the odds or defy their disadvantages. It goes back to the personal, right? What does that person have? That grit? Does that person have that chip on their shoulder? Does that person have that ability to press forward? Or do they need to be exposed to different information? Do they need to meet someone that looks like them, that's gone further than they ever imagined they can go? So I think I always want to refer back to the individual and to say, hey, unfortunately, we aren't equal in America. Unfortunately, we're not equal in the world. I didn't get to choose where I was born. I didn't get to choose what household I grew up in. I didn't get to choose the negative things that fueled me to do some of the positive things in my life. There's so many things I didn't get to choose. I didn't get to choose how tall I was. I didn't get to choose my skin complexion. There's so many things I didn't get to choose. But if I'm of able body, if I'm of sound mind, I can control the things that I can control. I can control how I spend my money. What is the output of my creativity? What are my ideas being manifested? And I could parallel that to fitness and health, and I could parallel that to other things, right? And so the food desert comment specifically was, yes, there are disadvantages. There are disadvantages. I worked in an after-school program, and there are neighborhoods that don't have a grocery store in walking distance. And then there's neighborhoods like mine, or like where my family lives in Del Mar, where there's a gajillion grocery stores in walking distance, right? However, if someone could defy the odds, that means you can defy the odds, right? And I don't mean on like a Michael Jordan level. Everybody's not going to be Michael Jordan. Everybody's not going to be, right, the Jay-Z. But I mean on an individual level, that we can defy the odds, and that regardless of what inequalities we're facing, growing up in a single parent home, growing up black, growing up poor, growing up whatever, we could all move the needle with the right information and inspiration. So I guess I say that to say that both can be true. And the reason why I think it is to take responsibility for my privilege and my whiteness is so that I can actually empower people with my own story. I had different disadvantages. I had different advantages. However, I'm able to change my family tree, and my son is going to go further than I have, and his kids are going to go further than than he has, because of the traditions that we're making now. So anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because I think that's the part that we don't often talk about, or it's like one or the other. There's these polar opposite views that are put together, and I think both are true. There needs to be some responsibility by people in power and people in privilege, and there needs to be responsibility by everybody for their own choices and their own decisions, right? So anyway, yeah. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, I 100% agree with you. If you are blessed with the access and the information and having guidance, and given the tools that you need to succeed in whatever area, I do believe that you do have personal responsibility in those areas. So when it came to the food desert comments, I definitely saw that was what you were getting at. I think what I mainly wanted to what I mainly was trying to draw attention to was the fact that that's just a big issue, and I didn't know if it was unclear to me, or it seemed kind of like, I don't know if you understood that. But it seems like based on your how you broke down where you stand on that, that you do understand that there are those disadvantages around us and those injustices, those inequalities that are present, and the people in power do need to make the necessary moves so that people in those positions can have those advantages, that they can be lifted up, and that they can make better decisions for themselves. Now, again, and like I said at the beginning of our conversation, if you have been blessed with the access to that, to those tools and to those types of foods, for example, again, going back to the food desert thing, then definitely you need to take advantage of that. I mean, you can't make excuses. Like if it is available to you, you need to make moves. At that point, you can't at that point, you can't make the argument for yourself personally that you don't have access because you do, or you don't have information because you do, and you can't blame other people because you do. However, it is important to still keep in mind that there are people in other communities that are suffering, and so that's pretty much just where I stand about it. Where I stand about it, and I totally agree with you. Further, but I have another example, but I don't want to ramble too much.
I love this. I love this conversation. Okay, so would you agree that anyone who is of able body and sound mind can make daily decisions to move themselves in the positive forward trajectory they would like to go in life, whether that's career, whether that's finances, fitness? Granted, the mother with 3 little kids is not going to be at the level where I'm at with my fitness, who's an entrepreneur, who has more disposable time, who gets to make his own schedule, right? I have a degree of advantage there, right? And I think that is where the nuance comes in, right? Because it's not a one size fits all. Like it's not, people are in different places, people are in different seasons. The kid that's 18, 19 that starts eating the right amount of proteins and macros and his testosterone is through the roof has an advantage over someone like me that's 35, right? And so I think there's so much nuance to that. But would you agree on a personal level that those of us who are of able body, of sound mind, have the opportunity here and now in 2020 with technology, with YouTube, with all these different amazing tools that we can make that progress, whether it's, man, I want to figure out how to make more money. I feel like if somebody's of able body and sound mind, they can figure out how to make more money. I want to figure out how to start a business, right? That on an individual level, you would agree that that's true.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So that's dope. So I think we agree on that. So I think there's some macro issues that we all need to deal with. And this is a great point. Shout out to Jermaine. He said, yes, that able body and sound mind is key for the Black community because PTSD is huge and passed down from slavery time. The idea of PTSD, and I actually started going to a therapist around this time last year and got diagnosed with onset PTSD, a bunch of stuff from my childhood. But the idea of PTSD is something that I think we don't factor in when we are considering people coming from different backgrounds and how that does impact. That's why I said of able body and sound mind, right? Because if you are like, I didn't know what I didn't know. Like I didn't know that I had issues I needed to work through until I started seeing a pattern in my life and saying, wait, this keeps happening with this area. Maybe I should go see a therapist, right? And then having the advantage and the privilege to go and see a therapist, the flexible schedule as an entrepreneur, the money to go and see a therapist, right? So I think that is a great point, that when you look at people who have gone through trauma, and I think trauma, we all react differently to trauma. Like we all react differently to trauma. There's some people that like, for me, the trauma fueled me to be relentless and diabolical, almost in an unhealthy way, to figure out how to never be poor. like that is what the trauma fueled me. At the expense of relationships, at the expense of friendships, at the expense of personal fallout. For other people, that they could experience the same level of trauma, and for whatever reason, they might end up homeless. they might end up with it going through a mental breakdown, right? And so, do you want to? Can you touch on just the idea of PTSD impacting people of color because of slavery, because of these things that maybe they didn't experience, but it's been handed down, and it's like a psychological thing that I may not understand, you know?
And to be 100% honest with you, my brother, because I have just come into my own realization of my own blackness in recent years. I haven't had me personally, I haven't had the passed down thing. But what I can say, I am appreciative to that brother who touched on that in the comments, because that is such a huge issue within the Black community, whether it be because of poverty, whether it be because you witnessed violence, and so many different factors. I feel like I personally feel traumatized when I see Black. Yeah. Oh God, Jesus help me! I'm about to cry. Don't let me cry, Jesus. Okay. When I personally see videos and hear stories of what's happening in today's time, not even just slavery. I'm talking about like recent, within the past 30 years up to yesterday, as we touched on at the beginning of here, it's like, I looked at that a gentleman on the ground in Minneapolis, and I just thought to myself, my Jesus.
Yeah, George Floyd.
George Floyd. Yeah, the article I read they didn't even have his name yet. So okay, yes, George Floyd. He seeing his face on the ground, I just think to myself, I'm like, my God, just my God. There is a man here, he cannot breathe, he is losing consciousness, and then he later dies, and you just see like just his face on the pavement, and it is again, like I think about my children, again, white people, you have this privilege. You have this privilege where you don't have to worry about your child being there, your brother, your father, your cousin, your uncle on the floors like that. You know what I'm saying? And so that for me, it's like that racks my brain, and that tears me up inside. And for people, and I personally have never, of course my family has had hard times in life, but I've never been, I think, in a place of poverty necessarily. I've had, again, like really hard times and everything, but I can only imagine what you may have gone through, Ruslan, and other people who have lived in poverty and have to work through like just their self-worth, have to work through their feelings of, white people just want to keep us down because they maybe have experienced racism on a high degree, and so it's not a small thing for them. It is, they just want to keep us in this down in this place because that's what they have experienced. And so we cannot minimize how that affects the mind, how that affects the heart, the spirit, how that breaks the spirit of a person, And just like you brought up, people can get on drugs, people can be homeless, people, and it's in the midst of that, some people may overcome and defy the odds, but maybe in the background they too are having therapy, there's a lot that goes into that. And so that cannot be discounted. We are human beings. And I know that everybody watching this has felt some degree of, like a broken spirit. Like imagine if that was repeated, repeatedly inflicted upon you externally, for no other reason other than the color of your skin, no reason other than because of show racism, you're in this position. You know what I'm saying? So and I would just chime in and say that some people will say, well, what do they do to deserve that? Well, what happened before that? Well, why was George Floyd in that position in the first place? And here's the thing: when you do that, when you try to dig up somebody's past, when you try to say, once upon a time he bought crack or whatever, right? Or he was, I forgot what the details were, but they were there for whatever. The thing is, you can't, if a woman gets raped,
you can't say, oh, well, she was dressed like a slut, so that's why she got raped. That doesn't justify the injustice of the rape. The injustice of the rape is horrible. Now, judgment on her part and what she did or didn't wear, that's another conversation. That's another conversation for another time. The issue is this woman got raped, and that sucks, and that is not okay. So when someone says, oh, well, so-and-so did this and this, and, he got hemmed up for shoplifting before, and this and that, none of that justifies the death penalty. Last time I didn't check, dressing like a slut didn't justify somebody getting raped, right? Shoplifting didn't justify murder. Breaking and entering or trespassing didn't justify the death penalty. These things are not, these are unjust scales. And so when you do that, you're victim blaming, you're victim shaming. In this situation, George Floyd had his windpipe pressed on to the point where he couldn't breathe. He pled for his life. He asked for, right? And the cop did not relent because maybe he was an outright racist. Maybe he hated black people. Maybe he was covert with his racism. Maybe subconsciously he felt his life was not invincible. His life was inferior to his. Whatever the reason is, when we see a pattern of this stuff, that is when we have to stand with black people and say, listen, these are not isolated incidents. It would be different if this happened once every 15 years, and then we would say, well, yeah, we got to look at the motives and examine the intent. No. This stuff happens multiple times a year that we see it, that we are seeing footage. We're seeing undeniable footage in real time. And I think that is where we have to factor in and say, okay, let's take responsibility and say, as a collective, as a society, we have some things we have to deal with. We have some things we need to address. I have some things I need to take ownership from, maybe in my own bias, subconscious or not, spoken or not. And I think that is where the conversation starts. But what's happening is there's women who are being raped, and we keep dismissing it and saying, oh, but you dressed like a slut, so you must have deserved it. And then we're wondering why there's a community of women who are enraged at men saying this, right? And so I'm using the metaphor with women and rape and with black, right? Hopefully you guys follow me. But that is what's happening, and I think that is where we have to say, okay, well, let me listen. Let me take time to listen. Let me understand. Seek first to understand before seeking to be understood. Like, that is huge. And so, anyway, I would love to, we can kind of start closing. If you got any final thoughts, I got your YouTube channel in the description of this. Thank you so much for doing this. But yeah, any closing thoughts that you have before we wrap up?
Darn it. And for your audience, who heard your last words, there was something that you said that I too wanted to touch on, but I'm not even remembering it right now. All I have to say is I pray that everything that we've talked about in this conversation, to take it to the Lord in prayer. And I was praying this morning, and I was like, God, let there be no stone unturned in my heart. On any issue. And I was like, God, like I bear myself before you. So I encourage you who are watching this right now to pray that prayer as well on this subject. If you have pushback, if you have like your reasoning and your mindset about it, I pray that you go humbly into prayer and you say, God, on this subject of racism, and everything that we talked about today, God, what have I not exposed to you yet for you to give, to shine your light on, God? Like, let there be no stone unturned in your heart. So that would be my last word to your audience.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And by the way, guys, just know that like a lot of my heart and my position on this is as a byproduct of countless black men and women that have been very patient with me, that have let me say things that in hindsight sounded really stupid. You know, when I was 18, 19, not understanding how this stuff worked, coming from a single parent home, poverty, and having to grow and evolve and understand my own privilege. And there's a ton of people. So I'm grateful. I'm so grateful that there's that dialogue can happen. I'm grateful that we can learn, and ultimately I would hope that we would take a position of humility, that we would take a position of listening, that we would not dismiss other people's pain because we don't understand it or because we don't relate to it, and while at the same time all of us making the most of our opportunities that we have before us, regardless of your ethnicity or whatever. But I think we as a collective, as a people, as a church, we will be way more unified and way more effective by coming together and listening, and instead of being dismissive. And so thank you guys for watching this. I appreciate you guys. And again, if you guys want to check out the YouTube channel, you can. It's in the description. I'll pin it up in the comments too. And I'm sure you'll be in the comments chopping it up with us, Kivana, and dropping some more gems. And if you guys have more questions, if you guys want to see something like this again, I'd love to have her back. We can have a follow-up conversation and go deeper. But thank you guys so much for watching this. Hopefully it blessed you. Hopefully it benefited you. I know I definitely learned some things. And I'm thankful for you guys, man.